Um, and if so, I think that there was only two outstanding questions we had remaining from December. So we're pretty close, right?
I think so. I wanted to check in with you all. I feel like we may be able to take a couple of the sections out of the document just for conciseness' sake, since this is mostly about communication. We have a lot of background information in there on physiological responses to trauma, what's triggering with trauma. Um, I feel like it might be able to remove those sections, but I wanted to check and see how you all felt about it. I can kind of show you, if I can share screen, I can show you what I was thinking about. And let me know. And this may be me just going, you know, we may need to leave it, and that's totally fine. Let me see if I can pull this up. Okay, great.
I
Okay.
am all for shortening if we
Okay.
can.
All right. Um, so, and just to a recap of what we're looking at here, we're preparing a document to explain what we mean by trauma-informed language, because the legislation requires us to use trauma-informed language in developing the survey. And so we wanted to put together a document that said, these are the things that you should be thinking about when you're looking at what trauma-informed language is. So we start off by saying, what is trauma? And we have some information about that. And then this interplay between event, experience, and effect, which I think is really helpful because that lets us look at trauma and intersectionality. Because I think we do need to cover that. Martina had asked about adding something about the social determinants of health and the ACEs in brief. Those might be, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think that we might actually have a more updated version that's a little shorter.
Okay,
Because we
this is
did a
the
little bit of the cutting, and in the most recent one on, um, the one that I uploaded, oh, where is it?
That's the one I was working from. The
Oh,
1212 one that was uploaded on Basecamp.
yeah, I think for some reason the, well, now I've confused myself, so never mind.
Okay. I'm gonna go ahead
Let's
and
go with the 1212 one. I'm so sorry. I think I might be working from a low one that was lower down on that list.
okay. I just put the link to that one in there. So um, I've got the view that I have right now for this document is the simple markup. It doesn't show, so if we show all the markup, it's too confusing for me to read. So
No, you
so
were totally right. I had accidentally downloaded the November version and it just was shorter because we hadn't finished it yet. Smart, Martina.
right, yeah.
Thank you.
Um,
And sorry, keep going.
Yeah, so the only thing with the trauma and intersectionality, I think maybe you suggested adding something about the social determinants of health and ACEs. I think those might be really great footnotes to have, but I'm not sure, like within the document, if we would want to add those.
Yeah, I think
Um,
we decided not to.
okay,
And I think we maybe just didn't delete that thread.
okay. Um, I think maybe adding them as footnotes might be a good idea, but I'm fine with that. And then all I had done with this, okay, so going back up here, um, right. So trauma and intersectionality, I swapped the position of two of the paragraphs so that we start off with what I think is a really strong and important sentence. Research has found that 66 to 85% of young people have been exposed to traumatic events. And then then that quote from the SAMHSA,
Mhm.
which I shortened just a little bit. I just removed the piece about
Awesome.
complex trauma because we're not really defining complex trauma. And then these two sections, the physiological responses to trauma and the what do the effects of trauma look like? I wondered how you would feel about removing those two sections and then just starting off with what isn't trauma. So we would go from um, trauma and intersectionality to what isn't trauma. And then what does trauma-informed mean?
So that's kind of getting rid of the physical effects,
Mhm.
or sorry, the physiology, the what do the effects look like, and the what can trigger or activate a trauma response sections.
Yes.
Okay, cool, cool. Um,
Because I think while those are important, I'm not sure that they really speak to the communication, but I may be wrong on that.
I think my only, I would say the only part of that that I'm like about is the triggering. And maybe with that we could just cut to a very short thing that includes like activation cues can be reminders in many ways, and we can just give a kind of like very brief one sentence thing, because
Mhm.
I do think that it is useful to know that reminders of a traumatic experience can be triggering, but maybe we can just do that in like two sentences and cut the whole rest of it. I'd be fine with that.
Do we want to talk about the difference between triggering and activating, or why there might be a use of those terms?
I mean, certainly I think it's useful to explain that trigger slash activations can happen. And it might be worthwhile to say that there is a movement away from the word trigger because of the sort of many fold connotations that it has, um, as just a little explanation. Um, I think that the portion about um, that, like, right below the chart, there's no way to know what's going to trigger a person, that section, I'm sure it could be shortened, but I think there might be an argument for including that, just because I know that one of the big things I hear from folks when they're thinking about like trauma informed, etc., is like, oh well, being trauma informed means you have to create something where it's impossible for anyone to feel any bad feelings when they encounter it. And I think it's important to say, like, that's not possible. What is possible is making a reasonable attempt to be considerate, and then also to make space for people to take care of themselves, like, kind of broadly. But again, we could do that probably in one sentence.
Mhm. Maybe we could too use a simile that specifically talks about language.
Sure.
So, um,
Maybe something like keeping those first two sentences, there is no way, and then in creating trauma informed spaces, broad assumptions, blah, blah, blah. And then we could use a for example that's like, for example, many people are activated by, you know, descriptions of sexual violence or sexual misconduct, reading descriptions of sexual misconduct. Others may be activated by, I don't know, something else that's a little bit of a harder one to come up with in writing.
mhm.
I think you can move, I think you could put it in, you could put another bullet point in the section where it says, how can communication be trauma informed? And then there's
Mm.
trauma informed communication includes, and then there's 4 bullet points.
Mhm.
Mm.
And then just add another bullet point that, and I'm not sure exactly what it should say, but something along the lines of, um, you know, language should be chosen to, I don't know, use some of the language
Yeah.
regarded, I don't know, language should be structured and chosen in a way that deliberately avoids triggering participants or triggering readers. However, I don't
Yeah.
know. It's a larger conversation, but I guess if we want to keep I feel like that would be an appropriate place to just to note it.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
If we want to keep that in there, and then it's there, but it's not necessarily expanded upon.
Mhm.
Yeah, and so maybe then we could say like avoiding graphic descriptions.
Well,
Oh yeah,
yeah.
selecting nonviolent language. That's great, Rowan.
I mean, in this, yeah, it says in creating trauma-informed spaces, we can make some broad assumption about things that are most likely to cause triggers and attempt to mitigate harm. So, oh, I don't, let's see, it's Rowan typing something.
Sorry, I'm, okay.
I'm back
I
in
have,
that section. Yeah.
okay,
Yeah, I like that.
okay,
Yeah, I think that's great. Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Work on that a little bit. Okay,
Mhm.
okay.
So maybe we could cut out that we can make some broad assumptions sentence and put that in a footnote even to the bullet point you just created.
Sorry, where's the broad assumptions?
Sorry,
Lost it.
it is, I wish we could use a Google Doc. So that that there is no way to know what
Oh,
is going to trigger a person, that one.
okay.
Perhaps we could just cut the sentence in creating trauma-informed spaces, we can make some broad assumptions, blah, blah, blah. Just that one
Mhm.
sentence and put that as a footnote to the bullet point you just wrote.
Okay. Okay, so if I copy that, delete, for example, I'm just doing this so that
Yeah.
I can see what we got, and then come down here to, where did I lose that?
How can
Okay.
communication, yeah, right there, that last bullet point.
Okay. I know, sorry. And then figuring out where stuff is often, there we go. Tricky here.
There's nothing like trying to do something in real time on Word when everyone's watching you to like really make Word not work anymore.
Well, yeah, and also to, yeah, I Word was designed by engineers, I think.
Not
And it
writers, yeah.
shows, yeah, it shows, yeah.
So maybe for the so I'm totally down with cutting the physiological response and the what do the effects look like. I wonder if we could summarize, oh, and sorry, and the what can
Mhm.
trigger or activate a trauma response. I wonder if we can summarize those last two sections in like one
Mhm.
sentence.
Mhm.
Like just to say like trauma responses are physiological as well as emotional or psychological. Effects can include emotional or mental health, behavioral, physical, developmental, blah, blah, blah. And triggers can include like maybe something that just like summarizes that in one sentence for each of those little sections rather than a whole lengthy 2-page thing that I yammered out
Mhm.
6 months ago.
Okay. I can go through and do that, and I will, what I'll do after this meeting is I will go through and I'll send out a clean copy that, and I will highlight the sentences that I'm writing as summaries and let you take a look at them and see what you think. And then,
Awesome.
and just a reminder, when I upload a new document to replace the pre-existing document, the old document's still there and you can still access it. So don't worry about losing anything. It'll still be available to you. Okay. So if we do all that, and then how can communication be made trauma informed? And then we get specific. So in the context of public facing communication, such as the sexual misconduct survey, this is where we've got those really specific things that we have done. And so maybe just a little bit more about how we, um, some of the ways that we have incorporated trauma-informed design include,
Mm.
so something like that.
I love that.
Okay.
As long as we have included them, I'm fully on
Yes.
board.
Okay. Yeah,
So
because we
in
should be doing that. Mhm.
so in that case, and this was a question that I had back in December, the section, the some questions to consider section, which is just, it's
Mhm.
below that when considering, oh, sorry, yeah, right there.
Mhm.
When considering whether a survey is trauma informed, I ask all, we have all these questions. Do you think therefore that that's redundant and that we could kind of collapse anything that's missing into the examples that you're going to give of some of the things we've done, and just cut that section, or do we think that's useful enough to leave it? It felt like we were kind of like I was kind of like reiterating the same thing that I had or that we had before, and I think I might be redundant there.
Mhm. Could we structure it so that we did something like, you know, how can you give a participant control over their experience, and then something like um, add the ability to, oops, sorry. Okay, provide.
Yeah, I guess I'm just wondering if we're giving examples in this in the little bit above of things that we've done,
Mm-hmm.
which include things like giving them an opt-out function.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I wonder if that bit's just redundant. And if not, this actually, I mean, it's possible that we're saying like, no, actually that would be really useful because an opt-out function is something that each institution gets to choose for itself or something like that.
Mm-hmm. We could also maybe combine them so that we said something like, in the context of public facing communications, blah, blah, blah. Some of the considerations that, or some considerations that we looked at were, and so I'm just wondering if we can say something like, some questions we considered in development of the survey were, how much control can we give the participant over the
Mhm.
experience? And then our solution, right? Or
Yeah,
yeah.
I think we could even make that into a like a side by side
Mm-hmm.
chart, that might be a space
Mm-hmm.
saver and also accessible.
Yeah, like make it a table or something,
Hmm.
or columns or something like that. Okay.
Yeah, I love a good table
Yeah.
personally.
So I like the idea of us providing here's the question, and this is how we tried to answer it.
Hmm.
That I think that structure works pretty well. And then down into the language options, I think this is so important. Really want to have this. And again, I think we might be able to add some of for example, in the survey, we chose to use
Hmm.
this language.
I love that.
Okay. As we still haven't finalized any of the questions in the survey yet, of course, obviously, but there are places where we've used, instead of using perpetrator or offender, for example, we make a point of saying we're choosing to use the term person who caused harm.
Hmm.
So I think we could use some specific examples.
Awesome.
And then again, victim blaming, and maybe add an example of, the way that we have tried to write the questions is to ensure that anyone reading these would not feel that they were somehow being blamed for the bad things that someone else had done to them.
Right.
And one example of how we are going to do that is when we're asking, were you drinking or using drugs at the time that this happened, and making clear that just to be clear, we'll have language in our survey that says, just to be clear, you are never responsible for the bad things somebody
Yeah.
else did to you, but you know
Yeah.
so, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, now that we have so much examples of the language we're actually using, I think
Yeah.
shifting this from here's what you should do to here's what we chose to do is really lovely.
Mhm. My high maintenance cat is trying to get me to play fetch with him. We were playing ping pong. I'm sorry, this is totally irrelevant. You can stop recording. No, we were playing ping pong with this little ball of paper over the top of my laptop. Like I would toss it and he would knock it back to me. He's scoring points on me. He's so much better at this
Oh,
than I
cute.
am. Yeah.
That's
But,
amazing.
yeah, it's pretty fun. Yeah. Oop, there he goes. Okay. I scored my point. Okay. Here's what we did. Okay.
My question, I guess, my only critique with the document generally right now, I think it's so well done. Um, but the accessible language just um and maybe this makes me seem kind of prudish, but we put in, the accessible language, which, is this is a public facing document. This is, I don't know, are the survey writers putting in the terms that we are suggesting in here? I mean,
It's a good question.
could we just leave it with technical language often needs translation, so technical terms may need to be paired with colloquial language and vice versa, and maybe not put the examples in for this document? That's my only sort of lawyer critique.
This is totally fair. This is definitely the stuff I use when I teach and not necessarily appropriate for public consumption, broadly speaking.
Which is, yeah, but I mean, I also understand our audience is, I mean, these are students and citizens, and I get all that. I wonder if we want to have those examples in this document, and whether or
Yeah.
not truly that language would be used in our survey.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Rowan, what's your take on what kinds of, like, are we asking questions wherein that might be relevant? Is there a different example we could use?
We are asking, we're asking questions about pretty specific behaviors, right? And so we're asking, did this person penetrate your body?
Okay.
And we're asking, um, I don't know that we'll ask specific questions about, did they put this body part in that body part, right? I don't think we really need to know that. But I think it's important to talk about, how do we do this? One of the things that we're going to try to do is use non-genital specific language because there are so many different ways that people refer to their genitals. Um, but we do have to talk about, we
Yeah.
have to talk about genitals, and we are talking about, we're not using the words rape or assault in the survey itself. And maybe we need to mention why we wouldn't do that. Katie, can you talk a little bit more about like which language particularly is kind of feeling like it's not appropriate to you?
It's not that it's not
Okay.
appropriate. It's
Okay.
the, for example, a participant may not know what ejaculating means, but
Uh,
may be familiar with coming or jizzing.
yeah. Yeah, I think we can leave that out. Yeah, definitely, because we're not going to talk about that. That's not,
Yeah.
Right.
we don't care about that for the purposes of this survey. So
And
yeah, okay.
kind of what I've always, of course, been taught, just sort of when you're talking with someone, is to mirror their language, right?
Mhm.
So that's the most important thing. In a survey, you're not talking with anyone or mirroring their language, but
Yeah.
and those terms certainly may not resonate with people. So I thought that could come out, and just the explanation about accessible language is probably enough.
I I think that's a great point, and especially, like that's the one that I always use in as example because I think it's the most like, oh boy. but I don't think we need to oh boy in this. But Rowan, I think the examples that you just gave about like genitals, for example, is a really great example because there are people who absolutely do not know what you mean when you say the word genitalia, who might know a word like penis, dick, vagina, whatever, whatever. And so we might say that again, like pairing those terms is useful, that if we're saying, you know, genitals, like what do we mean by that, and giving some examples of what we mean by that might be helpful. I don't know what examples we're choosing in the survey because I'm not on the writing committee, but it might be useful to give those examples. And I think also, Rowan, your point about we're not using the term rape specifically is a really good one because that is also an accessibility issue, right? Like that's a question about technical language. Rape is a technical term that doesn't necessarily have a universal meaning. It can have a lot of different meanings. And so actually describing like what literally are we talking about is more useful.
Yeah, yeah,
Although I
and of
might do
course,
that elsewhere.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
We might actually have that elsewhere.
Yeah,
We do, yeah, sorry. In Be
okay,
Specific, we do.
okay.
Though maybe we could give the example of why why we're choosing to use words other than rape.
Right. Yeah, I think what I've just drafted is where it says be accessible and then change that sentence to when possible, use terms that are appropriate for and understood by your audience. And then technical language such as anatomical terms often may need translation, something like that.
I think
Okay.
that's great. Yeah.
Okay, because there's going to be 60-year-old seminary students, and as well as 17-year-old non-binary queer students who
Yeah,
are going to
yeah.
be looking at this survey, right? So we need to use general language that's appropriate for all audiences.
Yeah, I think that's
Yeah,
really, really fair.
yeah. Katie, thank you. I think that's such a good point. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Making myself a note, and then I'm gonna share screen again just so we can get through the last bit of it.
Do you feel given that, I mean, I'm really trying to look at this through that lens, which is really helpful. Um, the next bit about values neutral, I mean, obviously I have my own opinion and feel very strongly about like people can make these choices. And also if I'm thinking through the lens of what did you say, the elderly seminary student, do we feel okay with those examples? Consensual power exchange, kink, BDSM, etc. Do we feel, I mean, like, again, I want to, and also I'm trying to check myself on that.
So maybe change that sentence to something that might be a little bit more neutral. Um,
Maybe we could just say something like people can choose to engage in many forms of romantic and sexual contact. And so long as it is consensual, those are decisions that they can make for themselves. And it's harmful to imply that relationship dynamics or sexual acts are equivalent to sexual violence. Like we can take out saying BDSM.
mhm. I think that works. Does that feel okay for everybody else?
Yeah,
So,
I think that could definitely come out or should come out.
Maybe we can add like just one more. Again, I'm trying to think from the perspective of someone who maybe genuinely does not know that such a thing as consensual BDSM exists and is like real and non-harmful for the people engaging in it. Maybe we could say something just a little bit further on that, that is like, people can consensually engage in many forms of romantic and sexual relationships, like, comma, even those that are not familiar to all, like, just like, even those that are, I don't know, niche, that's not the word I want to use. But maybe something that includes, like, even some that don't look familiar, that may not look familiar to everyone, just to sort of put out there that, like,
Yeah. I'm wondering about that because my 17-year-old non-binary queer student
right.
thinks that trad wife is really weird and abusive, right?
I do actually agree with that. 17-year-old.
Okay, but my 60-year-old seminary student, that's worked for them for 40 years, right? Like,
right.
so yeah, so yeah.
So maybe even if though, so maybe we're saying people can choose to engage in many forms, even if those don't match your personal values. And I don't actually think that all trad wife relationships are necessarily abusive.
I would say I've seen both trad wife relationships become abusive as well as BDSM relationships become abusive. I
Same,
think that
same.
there's you know what I mean? Like, I think just leaving it as with the very first sentence, don't imply they're forms of consensual sex or relationship models that are right or wrong, or conflate them with sexual misconduct is fine. And I think going on to define it is confusing.
Okay.
I mean, sometimes adding more language just further confuses things. So simple
Right.
is often best. Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Yeah, yeah. And I've seen some things where there've been that, oh boy. Yeah, just thinking about the well, you don't the 20-year-old who's in their first BDSM relationship and is being told, oh, this is perfectly normal that, that I'm doing these things and you don't get to say, right? Like yeah. People figure out,
Yeah,
yeah, people are amazingly inventive when it comes to figuring out ways to get power and control over each other.
very incredibly true.
Yeah.
And anyone who is super, super interested in that can come take Sass's free 10-week course on healthy sexuality.
Nice.
It's free.
It's free. Oh, that's good to know, actually. That would, God, I'd love, yeah, that would
It's
be really helpful.
it's really fun. Yeah, we do it,
Okay.
well, fun. We typically do it once a year. It's a good one.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I don't want to get us off track too much, and I'm totally willing to go down that rabbit hole. Okay. Be aware of power imbalances. Love that. Person harmed by the behavior does not have the power to make it stop. Okay. And then gender and sexuality, inclusivity. We talk about the experiences that men may have and how the violence against women language tends to erase that. I don't know that this is helpful.
I mean, if we're not using language like that, I think we can probably cut it. I have that included because there are some examples, like within,
Mhm.
like, even there's a federal DOJ definition that I don't know if it's actually now not there anymore, but as of 2 years ago, it was
Mhm.
still the one they were using that included
Mhm.
the phrase heterosexual and homosexual rape. And so it's one that I've always used as an example for how those kinds of concepts can be really harmful. But if we're the ones choosing the language and we've already chosen not to do that, then I don't think we necessarily need to caution against something we're not doing.
Okay.
Nor do I think we need to explain it if it's something that we're not doing, because
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like we can probably, because we're not really going to talk about this. Maybe.
maybe I would say, if we're gonna and I'm fine with cutting that, that the last chunk of it from a person's experience of violence to the end of that sentence. Um, Perhaps we could keep that bit and include it in the paragraph above, just as a way of demonstrating that, like, we treat these things as identity-based issues and determinative of a person's identity, and that that's not great.
Mhm. So something
Like, I
like
really,
that.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I think it's important to note that, like, especially for male survivors, this is this particular dynamic that can arise.
Mhm. Mhm.
Although that very final, so their masculinity and sexuality would be harmed, I don't think it's needed.
Okay. And I'd also like to put something in, something like, and men who
Hmm. Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
their experience diminished as
Hmm.
and that is awkward.
I would just say as not real.
Okay.
Also, not to copy edit in real time, but I don't think need the comma after real. Sorry.
Okay. Okay. And I think maybe move this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oops. I'm also a terrible typist. Did I? Okay. All right. Okay.
It dawns on me that maybe that that sentence that we made a footnote about triggers or activations could potentially just go in that summary paragraph there.
I'm not
Yeah,
sure
yes,
exactly what
yeah,
I'm just gonna put it
absolutely.
there. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that looks,
Yeah.
yeah. Mwah, that looks good.
But yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Okay. So again, I just feel like this is going to be such an invaluable document, just as it is. I'm going to, like I said, I'll send out a clean copy, play around with a couple of those sections we talked about. I'll try to get that out to you today. If you could get comments back to me, um, by like Monday, that would be really great. Katie, I know you're really busy. I don't know if Monday would work for you. Would you have time to maybe go over it one more time between now and then?
I'll give it my best.
Okay. And then what I'd like to do with this, I want you all to present this to the full council and say, this is what we're looking at. I think it also needs to be incorporated into the implementation guidelines that we give. And I will also think it could be a standalone product that we can link to on the web page. And so what I'll do when you all are satisfied with it is share it with our communications director and ask her to format it as a HEC document. We had also talked about trying to condense it to a one-pager. It's currently, how many pages is it?
12.
12, yeah. It's still, yeah. So I'll see if I can maybe come up with a summary version too and get that to you to take a look at, just so it's a little more accessible for people who don't have time to read 12 pages.
I think that's a good idea.
I think we also said that we could ask the implementation and outreach committee also if they wanted to take a look at it and try to find a way to make a abridged version. Kind of farm it out to them a little. They're busy right now though, so I don't want to overload them, but
yeah. Yeah, we had delegated that to them. To be honest, I'm probably going to end up doing it anyhow, so it's okay either way. So, but I'd love for you all to take a look at it and make sure I'm getting the most important points. All right.
nice. I think we continue to hone in on the essential bits and cut out the stuff that is interesting but not relevant, and I'm excited about that.
I think it should be, it should be quite a bit shorter now that we took out. I don't know what it's at.
Mm-hmm.
When you do the, update, I bet it's like 6 pages.
Yeah. Yeah.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah. Right. Okay. So once this is done, next steps for this committee will probably be reviewing the draft survey, which I'm hoping we will have available by next week. The survey writing committee is meeting tomorrow morning, hoping to have the final draft or the rough draft available for the full council next Thursday. And then, so your next meeting would be after the council meeting would be to take a look at the survey and go through some of the language and see if there are things that need to be revised. And making sure that and now that we have this document to refer back to, right, are we being consistent with the survey and the document? So I think that'll work out well.
Cool. Okay.
And what's the timeline on that, Rowan? When do we, so we have our meeting next week and then, okay.
Yeah. And then my hope is that we'll have a final draft of the survey ready by the February 23rd meeting. I think that's the date.
Okay.
So yeah. So that would give you almost 4 weeks. Well, no, give you 4 weeks to run through it. So might need to have a couple of meetings in that, well, at least one meeting in that time. The language goes into the language that I'm hoping we'll have available by the end of February is the language that will be put into the pilot. So there's plenty of opportunities to get that fine-tooth comb and go through the document a few more times. But it should be in pretty good shape so that when we send it out for piloting, people can see that we've made an attempt to make sure that the language is trauma informed.
Okay. In setting meetings for the next 4 weeks, I will be from basically February 3rd to February 14th in court. So I definitely won't be available for meetings those 2 weeks, but the week after the trial, I should be in better shape.
So that council meeting is on the 27th of February, right at the end of the month. So yeah, there'll be some time there to schedule after your
perfect.
trial.
Great. Just giving everyone a heads up there.
Sounds good. So if we were looking at a meeting somewhere around, so the 17th is President's Day. We're closed on that. So it'd be like the week, 18th, 19th, 20th, 21st, one of those days, so that we
Okay.
could have a meeting before the next council meeting.
Perfect.
Okay.
Yeah. I got a lot of flexibility as of this moment in that week.
Yay. Okay. Okay. So Kevin, can you send out the when is good for those dates?
Yes, I will.
Thank you so much. I think that's it.
Woo!
Okie doke.
Well, in that case.